The fact that we bought this tiny little circus and were audacious enough to stick it in front of Caesar's Palace actually caught a lot of attention. And, I think the locals loved it because it gave them a reason to go to the Strip to see something new. We create the idea, and then along the way, we iterate as to what space it should go into. I love the fact that it's a hospitality industry, that I can go and see one of our shows and I can see people roar and the roof come off the place. And I just love the fact that we're doing things that are unexpected and delightful for the majority of our audiences.
Welcome to the StageLync podcast, your access and connection to the live performing arts. In this podcast, you'll hear from some of the industry's most inspiring people from around the globe who create magic on stage and backstage. Our guests share their knowledge, passion, and the real stories of how a show comes together. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the StageLync podcast. My name is Robb, and today we're speaking with Ross Mollison. Ross is the founder of Spiegelworld, the audacious entertainment and hospitality company behind the hit Las Vegas shows such as Absinthe at Caesar's Palace, Atomic Saloon Show at the Venetian, DISCOSHOW at 3535 Las Vegas Blvd, and The Hook at Caesar's Atlantic City. Mollison spearheaded the creation of Spiegelworld's first restaurant, Superfrico, and the award-winning speakeasy, The Ski Lodge at the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas, as well as Dinah Ross, recently named Eat Vegas Best New Restaurant. Ross, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you, Anna.
You and I are both from Victoria, Ross. It's in Australia.
Really? Where'd you grow up?
Mansfield, actually. You know Mansfield?
Oh, wow. I do.
Yeah.
I went to school with the baker's son. I'm trying to remember his name. But yeah, I used to go to Mount Buller a lot. And I always remember stopping at the Witch's Brew for a hamburger on a Sunday night.
Oh my goodness. The Witch's Brew. They used to have a beautiful Coke float. What are those things called where you put the ice cream in the Coca-Cola? That's crazy. That's where I grew up.
I never had that, but I remember their hamburger was fantastic there.
Oh, there you go. Well, we have that in common. That's awesome. So I wanted to start actually because you've had a wonderful international career into entertainment, but you came from Australia. So what was your path into live entertainment?
Well, I just grew up next to people who loved circus, which got me going in the circus. And then my parents were really into me learning an instrument. So I kind of learnt the electronic organ because it was the 70s. And then I moved into piano and violin and other things. Then I really got into singing. I went to a school where we sang hymns every morning, and then I got into the chorus, and then I got into musicals, then I ended up in plays. So I always loved music, especially music. And, I often thought that I was going to be a doctor. If I didn't become a doctor, I'd become a musician. And if I didn't become a musician, I'd become a businessman. And somehow I ended up a businessman. That's like 14-year-old Ross thinking about what he's going to do. But at the end of the day, it was really just my passions that drove me more and more out of actually performance and more into the backstage role. But I just really, really love the whole concept of putting stuff together and putting things on stage.
And you did an economics degree, am I correct? Did that help you in your path towards producing?
Well, it absolutely did, because I was offered a job at the university theatre, and that's really how it helped me. That didn't help my economics degree because I spent 99% of my time in the theatre, either producing shows, performing in shows, or promoting shows there. But ultimately, I did finish my economics degree. Really, it felt more of an obligation than a desire. I mean, you still call on those skills. You still think back to what you learn about inflation and consumer demand and monetary policy and things like that. So you do have an understanding of it, which is really just to say that that when somebody talks about what's going to happen, they could be right or wrong.
Mm-mm. What was your first sort of real producing gig that you had in Australia?
I mean, the biggest producing gig I did was while I was still a student, which we produced West Side Story. And we produced this massive musical. And normally we'd spend about 10 grand, the student company, producing a musical, but we spent like $25,000 or something. And we ran it for 3 weeks and the thing grossed like 60 grand. And so
Wow.
we just had all this money at the end of it. It was fantastic. It sold every ticket. And, at the same time, I developed a children's theatre company and we started producing little plays and putting them on. We did one at the Bondi Pavilion in Sydney with Ginger Meggs. We did Blinky Bill that would tour. We did Alice in Wonderland. So, we had kids from our college performing in these little children's shows all over Australia, which was kind of fun.
I love that. I love that. And then what was your trajectory in terms of your career to sort of go international? Was there a particular show? Was there a particular opportunity that had you head overseas?
The really great opportunity that got me to America was producing Puppetry of the Penis, which was this two-hander, I guess you could call it, show with the guys making shapes, making installations using body parts. And they were naked on stage and had 2 microphones and a projector. And it was really just a 45-minute comedy developed by a guy called David Friend and Simon Morley, 2 guys who were actually very, very funny and part of the comedy industry. And so that got me to America, and just producing that around the States really helped me because it cost very little to put on. And so you could learn, and it got a lot of attention, either for the right or the wrong reason. Sometimes we'd get banned, but usually that would promote us. But sometimes we'd get banned and we actually couldn't go on stage because we get kicked out of the theater. But, we ended up on 42nd Street at the John Houseman Theater. We ended up in a lot of prestigious theaters around America, and usually there was a real interest in it because it was a very unusual way of producing a live entertainment.
I love that. That's actually something else that we have in common, Ross, because I did a tour of that when I was very young in around rural Victoria, and I was like the company manager, and I went in a van with a couple of guys. It was many years ago. And even to this day, I leave it on my CV to see if anyone reads my CV properly, to see if they ask me about it.
Oh my God, those tours were legendary. There was one, I think, where they had a car accident, and I think Simon Morley swore off ever driving again. I don't think he drives anymore as a result of that. But yeah, those tours were quite incredible. Well, we had a lot of fun. Those guys were fun, and we took it to Canada. We translated it in French, and we ended up at a comedy festival at Mont Blanc in Switzerland. We did, it was called Le Marionnette du Pigny, and we did it in Paris at the Palais de Glace in Montmartre. So, it was a fun time.
And so I want to move now into the Spiegelworld concept. And you first did this in New York. And how did that come about? Like, where did you get the funding from? How did you get buy-in? And how was it received when you first put it up in New York?
Well, I'll start with the end, but it was received incredibly well. We launched it on a place called Pier 17, which is under the Brooklyn Bridge, which was totally against where you would think it was a good place to launch a show in New York. There were no shows down there. New Yorkers didn't want to go there, but it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. So, it looked across at Dumbo. To your right was the Statue of Liberty on the East River under the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was a fantastic place. It was a bold idea to do it there, but it really worked, and we absolutely loved being there. We were there for 3 summers. But it really started when a friend of mine, David Bates, launched a show called Le Clique in Edinburgh in about, I think it was 2004. And I was working with Cirque du Soleil at the time, and we were, can't remember, that was after the Kidam tour. We were probably, I can't remember what one we were doing there, but we were touring in the Chapiteau, Le Grand Chapiteau, 2,554 seats. And it was just fantastic. Like, we sold over 1 million tickets on the Australian-New Zealand tour for Kidam. Incredible success. And Cirque were getting bigger and bigger. So they were going into arenas. And I saw what David was doing in Edinburgh, and in thinking about what I was producing myself, and he was getting smaller and smaller. Like he was literally producing this in a 100-year-old Spiegel tent with about 200 seats. And I thought, wow, that is a beautiful way to produce. And, and one guy, this guy who's a very, very big deal hotelier, Andre Balas, once said to me, we really should be doing this for like $20,000 a ticket for 10 to 20 people in one of my hotel penthouses. And, it gets you thinking about, are there other business models that can be founded to do things in a different way? And so that's really what the start of it was. We performed in New York for 3 years, but then we ran headfirst into the global financial crisis in 2008 and kind of wiped out by that and had to rebuild after that.
And when you rebuilt, did you rebuild back in New York, or that was when you kind of you attempted to move it to Vegas?
Well, we attempted to move to Vegas. We did a deal with the Fontainebleau Hotel, and we were building a theater there in 2009, and then the Fontainebleau went bankrupt. So instead of actually helping us and saving us, we ended up being sued by the bankruptcy trustee for, any monies that had ever been paid to us. And that started like a year of negotiation to try and survive through that. And so after that, I was kind of at a loss for what to do, and I just started from scratch again. And we eventually did a deal with Caesar's Palace to use a bit of concrete in front, a very famous piece of concrete in front of Caesar's Palace called the Roman Plaza. And we put a tent up there, and we tried our luck there, which most people thought would not work. 2011, we opened on April 1st, April Fool's Day. And it just felt like a time of extraordinary unease. It felt like nobody was doing anything new in Vegas at that time. Everybody was still coming back and licking their wounds after 2009. But I think that was actually a really good time to launch in hindsight, because nothing else much was happening. The fact that we bought this tiny little circus and were audacious enough to stick it in front of Caesar's Palace actually caught a lot of attention. And, I think the locals loved it because it gave them a reason to go to the Strip to see something new.
Yeah, and I think, having seen the show myself and having worked on the Strip on Las Vegas shows and the Cirque du Soleil shows, I think there's something quite intimate and visceral about Absinthe, because you feel you're so close to the action. And in some of the Cirque shows now, you're kind of looking at it from a distance, and you don't have much. Sometimes you don't have an appreciation for what that art is doing until it's right in front of your face, And so what I loved about being in that small tent and quite in an intimate space was just how close you to the action, but then also the very, the type of comedy and the crassness of some of the jokes was also something that was quite refreshing, because I hadn't sort of experienced that in Vegas as well. And it was a great combination, I think, that Absinthe did. I guess my question from that is, you've got something that's so niche and so specific. How then did you think how to make the other shows that you sort of put in Vegas, and what's the spin-off, and how do you make those other shows unique to your brand?
Well, I think, having worked with Cirque for a decade, that was always our principal concern. What is the turn cycle of returning to market? And when you've sold 1 million tickets in somewhere like Australia, New Zealand, when do you come back? I mean, obviously, the chief financial officer wants you to come back immediately. But, how long do you leave the ground fallow before you go back and re-excite the market? Especially with that, when you were talking about a pretty high average ticket price by Australian standards at that point in time. So, in that all leads to, how do you differentiate the new product? How do you re-excite the market? How do you build a fan base? And how do you do something that when they attend, they go, well, this was not what I expected? And I always say there's no point in doing another Absinthe. Like, I can't make a better production of O. I felt like Steve, Wynn, and Franco tried to do that with Le Rêve, and I just don't think you can. That O is like the best water show I think that could possibly exist. It's amazing. And so it's, for me, I don't think there is a better version of Absinthe that I can create anyway. Maybe one day somebody will, but I don't have that vision. But when we create something new, I just look to what I want to see, I would be excited by. And so that's why I'm looking at something like DiscoShow, which is a very different thing for a circus company to be doing, largely a choreographed and dance-focused, music-focused idea, but then using technology, a lot of technology, to make an unexpected venue where people come and see Absinthe, will come in and see DiscoShow and go, oh my God, that's the same company. And that to me is kind of the greatest compliment, to kind of know your market well enough to know that they're going to be excited by something that's totally different from what they've experienced from you in the past. And also for me as a producer and for all the people who work in our company, I think it's exciting, to do something totally new like that, to do a restaurant like Superfrico, or currently we're working on a production called The Party. And The Party is a 50-seat theatre. It's tiny. And, we're spending a very precise amount of money on this to try and build something that can work with a 50-seat audience capacity. And so, it's a little bit of kind of palazzo dinner theatre and a little bit of Spiegelworld. And so that, again, is so totally different from, say, DiscoShow or what we've done in Atlantic City or what we initially did with Absinthe in Vegas.
I love that. And I guess that leads to my next question in terms of your creative team or team that you put together to create these different iterations of Spiegelworld concepts. Is it the same team, or are you bringing new people in? How do you encourage innovation when you're going to approach something that's completely different from the last thing you did and the next thing and the next thing?
Yeah, I think we go out to a wide group of people, and we have an internal creative team, which we call NUDE, the Nipton Office of Design. And the Nipton Office Design really focuses on the architecture of restaurants, the interior design of restaurants, the architecture of theater, and now the planning of a town, which we're working on in California in Mojave Desert. But then, there are creatives within there who also are involved in, who are the directors we'd like to work with? Who are the choreographers we'd like to work with? Who are the art directors we'd like to work with? And, we have an art director on staff, we have an architect on staff, but then we work with other architects, we work with other art directors, and obviously theatrically, we work with a wide range of people. I think the point is to say to them is to look for a wide brief. It's not to go to these people and say, yeah, we want you to come and work with you, and here's the business model. If you're that defined around the business model, you really crush the creativity of the creative staff that you would bring to a team. And I mean, that's a lot of theatre is defined by that. Like if you're a repertory company like the Sydney Theatre Company, you're mainly going to perform in the drama theatre at the Opera House or at the Wharf. You're not looking to say, yeah, you can build a tent any size you want.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess at some point, like you said, your 50-seat theatre or your 50-seat concept, it'll have to come back to the business model anyway. But what you're saying to me is that you're opening the door to create a business model based on the creativity and based on the things that people might bring to the table. You're not starting with the business model and building it around. You're allowing the business model to evolve based on that creative process. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of what we do is non-specific to theatres. So we create the idea, and then along the way we iterate as to what space it should go into. It's not like we've got, someone calling up from the Lyric Theatre in Sydney saying, deliver us a show for this 2,000-seat theatre, which would be fine. That would be maybe interesting. And sometimes you see interesting things in my world, in the circus world, done in spaces like that. But, it's far more exciting to me to go out and say, yeah, we're going to build a new restaurant. There might be a bar. There might be 4 bars. And there's going to be a theater. How many people should it be? I mean, when you're in Atlantic City, a seasonal regional market, how big do you want the theater to be? How do you create intimacy in the second week of January when it's snowing on the boardwalk? Like those sort of questions that you want to answer so that you can actually build a permanent attraction. They're all really interesting questions. And I think the Tony Awards were last night, and you see O'Mary do so well with a director, whom we know very well, Sam Pinkleton, winning the Tony Award. And you go, wow, for something that is, recreative, a creation of Mary Todd Lincoln as a cabaret star with a non-binary artist creating the piece, to win a Tony Award, you say, well, that is just so fantastic, because that just shows when you create something that's exciting to you, that's like, that doesn't fit any business model for Broadway. That is just like way out of left field. And then to come in and sweep the awards, I go, well, yes, they deserve that. Absolutely they do. That is so much more exciting than seeing a revival of Sunset Boulevard. I mean, which is fine to see a revival of Sunset Boulevard. It's fine to see a revival of Pirates of Penzance. I grew up loving those things more than anyone, but it's not what I want to produce now.
I love that. I think that anytime something that's going to be so successful really has to come from outside the box. And I love your approach to trying to come up with the concept and the thing before you're thinking about the venue. I want to ask, in that process, though, are you thinking much about the demographic and the location that you're putting it in? Does that play into your creative process? Or are you sort of thinking about just staying at the forefront of creativity and hoping that the audience is going to like what you make? How much does the audience play a part in your thought process?
It plays a lot. It plays a lot. And I don't know how to answer that question because, when we launched Superfrico, it's generally considered the worst location in one of the best resorts. It was down the back of the theater, a long way away from where the restaurant precinct was. And yet it's enormous success. And, Atomic Saloon is on the 3rd floor of the Venetian. Very, very hard to find, but just launches with so much success around it. And then you've got Absinthe, which a lot of people said, well, you're crazy. Nobody's going to go to a tent on the Strip. That's stupid. In front of Caesar's Palace, on the corner of the Strip and Flamingo. Pretty much, the best location in Vegas. So, where will the audience go? And I think the answer to that is the audience will go somewhere that they're excited to go to. And if you can't generate the excitement, then they're not going to go. So the location is not as important. Now, I have all sorts of rules and they're frequently broken. But one of my rules is never produce a show where your average ticket price is going to be higher than the average room rate. So for me, that's why Jersey Boys failed in moving to Paris, because its average ticket price was higher than the average room rate of the Paris at the time when it did that. When it was at the Venetian, now that's a rule that I have for producing in Vegas around moving shows around. But maybe it was just that they moved it. Maybe that's what stopped that show in its tracks, because it seemed to be a specific musical that could play to ever. It was demographically perfect for the Venetian at Vegas, for that 50 plus upper middle income person who's spending $500 on a room night. So my rule may be wrong, but then we have a lot of rules about how we can get the demographic there. But ultimately, the disco show is in the link. I've had casino resort presidents say, you're producing that at the link? I'm like, well, 40% of the market for Absinthe comes from Bellagio and comes from Venetian. These are people who are staying in $500, $1,000 rooms, walking across a bridge and going into this rough looking old tent to see a show. So my point is, yeah, because the Link is the best location in Vegas. I have a door on the strip at 3535 Las Vegas Boulevard. Now, will the demographic from the Wynn, Venetian, Aria, Bellagio, Caesars want to go to the Link, which is a value property? Only time will tell. But the audiences are growing, and as that baby boomer demographic discovers a show around disco, they will come. And I also think it easily captures that 20 to 30-year-old set who are going, what the hell? This show is amazing. We can go and there's a little bit of learning if you wish. You can sit down if you wish, or you can dance if you wish. This is like the next iteration of what a nightclub could be. And so, but they're my hopes and dreams. Will I be successful? Time will tell.
Well, you got to try, don't you? And I going back to your point about Superfrico and its kind of location, I remember going to it quite a few years ago and being lost a little bit trying to find the place. And by the time you got there and you were in the environment, you kind of you forgot about the journey to get there. And I think your point being is, yes, it can be about the location, but if the product is good enough, then people are willing to go to the location to see it, and that becomes part of the story or the journey and the experience of itself, getting there, finding it, being a part of it, and sharing that with people. I'm interested in your, because you're branching out and you're doing it with food, and now you're going to make a town. So tell us about the town and what the plan is for this project.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we purchased Nipton a couple of years ago to do a strategic retreat a few years before, and we had a fantastic time. And it became available during the pandemic, and we were kind of at a loss for what to do because our business was closed. And this came up, and we said, well, what if we built, and we just called it a circus town. What if we built a circus town out there? It's about 45 minutes out of Vegas, depending how fast you drive. But is there an opportunity to go out there and do things? Because we could build a 100,000 square foot warehouse out there if we wished. We could build a 100,000 square foot rehearsal venue. We could build apartments for 30 people to go rehearse a show. There's all sorts of different things that we could do there. And so we've working on this plan to kind of create a surrealist circus town where, you can come and stay, and you can book in and stay for a night or stay for a week. We have a 5-room hotel, and we're expanding that with 10 extra rooms that we're building out of 70-year-old, what are called Spartan Imperial Mansions. And they're these incredible caravans that I have this idea that some notional circus toured America in the 50s, sponsored by John Paul Getty, the guy that owned the Spartan aircraft factory that made them. And these glorious things pulled up and set up a town. And we're hoping that there's 10 of these, and there's 10 big tops up permanently. And so you come there, and it's an arresting visual image and a beautifully luxurious kind of experience that, will resonate in your mind for the rest of your life having been there. And so the first thing, we've just finished Spartan Imperial Mansion number 1. We've renovated our pond. We have a massive pond out there, which was in a sad state, but we've put in ozone and ultraviolet filtration and introduced new fish into that. So that's really beautiful. And then we're going through building by building. We've finished a ceramic studio. So we're now just getting the kilns and everything delivered so we can start making our own ceramics for the restaurants we run. And there's a few artists out there already living, a Broadway video artist, a Broadway costume designer, a props makers who actually also run the town for us. Ceramic artist lives out there. And so we're constantly offering the town up to artists who want to come and live there. and just building out this incredible space in the Mojave Desert, which is at 3,000 feet above sea level. It has Joshua trees. We have an enormous sculpture park where we're rebuilding this massive sculpture called Bloom that was in Burning Man in 2017, 2018 at Center Camp, and then talking to other artists that we know and love about what sort of artwork could go in our sculpture park there that would be globally unique. And then whenever I get a chance, whenever I go to Vegas, I always spend a night or two in Nipton and invite a whole bunch of people out for dinner.
It sounds like an amazing playground for creativity.
Yeah, it is. We've done a few workshops out there. You know, we rehearsed our Formula One show. We did a Formula One show during the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and we're working on a new idea, which we'll probably workshop out there for the Formula One festival that comes to Vegas now every year. I happen to love Formula One. I realize the impact it has on the city, but equally I understand the impact it has on getting people globally excited about Vegas. Hopefully this year, by the way, will be neck and neck for the winner of the race. It doesn't look like Max Verstappen's just going to drive around and win every race. And it may actually be Oscar Piastri, the Australian, who wins, but equally it could be Lando Norris. It could still be George Russell, I think. And Charles Leclerc is looking positive. So, but we have created things out there. We've been out for workshops for our new show, Lady Magic, which is going to Annabelle this August. We're doing that at the Pleasance for a month. That could be a show for Vegas. It could be a show for Macau. It could be a show for New Orleans. It might be a touring show we do in Australia. I'm not sure yet. But, we just see how it develops.
I would love to see one of your shows over here in Macau region. That would be awesome.
I've been to Macau many times. I haven't unlocked an idea yet to really capture the local market. I think that's the difficulty of it. I've been to the opening night of Cirque du Soleil there and Franco's show, Dancing Water. I can't even remember what year that was, but both of which were incredible productions. But then I've been to little boutique things there, and each time I'm just going to say, well, what is the market here? Which comes back to your earlier question. How do you create something that market that's going there for gaming would also want to spend money on a ticket for? I think it's very, very difficult in any market now to get that right.
Yeah, and it's an interesting demographic because most of them come across the border. So you really need to understand what the, local demographic, Chinese demographic is going to be interested in terms of entertainment in that space. And a lot of people have tried to put more resident shows in that region without success for a long term. But I still believe that there's potential. There's enough people going there, right? And so as long as you capture their attention, there's possibility. There's possibility in that space. But most of your stuff, been European and American recently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I agree. We're focused on the UK, but equally we have performed. We did take one of our productions to Japan, and we have toured America, Canada, and Australia and New Zealand. But we've been moving away from that touring model for us and more into the permanent residency model, which, the touring model seems to be, we'd make $1 million in one city and lose it in the next. And you just hope that you ended $1 million up. It's like leaving a casino, really. And it's really difficult because there's so many different factors of timing and cost, and especially when we were dealing with a Spiegel tent structure. And those structures can be loved by a local fire department or hated. So you've got to be very, very careful with that.
Amazing. We always finish our podcasts with 2 questions, so I'm going to ask you these now. What's your most favorite thing about your job or the industry?
My favorite thing is that I just get up every day and I can't wait to see what happened last night if I've been asleep and there's been things on. I love the fact that it's a 24/7 industry. I love the fact that it's a hospitality industry, that I can go and see one of our shows and I can see people roar and the roof come off the place. And I just love the fact that we're doing things that are unexpected and delightful for the majority of our audiences. I don't want to overanalyze it. I just love how much fun it is.
I love that. I love that. And if you could change one thing about the industry or your job, what would that be?
Oh, wow. I think I would just like to be doing this 100 years ago. I think that would have been really fun to be doing this in a period where we were at the forefront of technology. We weren't the rear guard of technology. But, it will be interesting to see what opportunities AI or, we've been working hard with these Vision Pro things, trying to work out how we can do a show with these Apple Vision Pros. So we try and use technology, but it would be wonderful if you were at the forefront of technology, but I doubt I can change that. I think the cat's out of the bag. I don't want to be a decelerationist.
I love that. Ross, what a pleasure to speak with you today on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you the best for Nipton and all the other projects that you're undertaking in the future. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Anna. Lovely to meet you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the StageLync podcast. StageLync is an online platform that gives you access and connection to the live performing arts. As a guest, you can read about live performing arts from across the globe and gain insights from performers and artists on stage and all the amazing people who work behind the curtain. If you are an industry professional, StageLync Pro offers jobs, networks, and career support tools, and you can build your own professional profile on the site. As a StageLync podcast listener, you are eligible for 20% off your StageLync Pro membership. Visit us at stagelync.com, and when joining, use the code SLPodcast. StageLync, that's StagelYnc.com.